The story begins far away from Earth, in a quiet corner of the galaxy where almost nothing ever changes. For years, a group of alien researchers lived on a floating station above a peaceful blue planet. Their days were calm, and their routines rarely shifted. Most of their work involved listening to the natural sounds of space, watching how stars moved, and recording signals that were millions of years old. Nothing surprising ever happened there, and maybe that is why what occurred next felt so strange to them. One regular day, while the team was checking data from their long-range sensors, a strange pulse suddenly appeared on their screens. At first, nobody paid much attention. Space is full of random noise radiation bursts, broken signals, echoes from dying stars. But this one didn't fade away like natural noise usually does. It repeated, then repeated again. It wasn't loud or strong, but it carried a certain rhythm, almost like someone far away was trying to knock on a door that was light years wide. The youngest researcher on the team leaned closer to the screen, confused. "Is this part of today's calibration?" they asked. The others shook their heads. It wasn't. They checked their instruments, their filters, their systems. Everything was normal. The signal was real, and it was coming from the far rim of the galaxy, a place no one really paid attention to. The station supervisor finally looked at the data more seriously and ordered a deep scan. Within minutes, more details appeared on the monitors. The pulse came from a small, quiet region far beyond the usual traffic routes, far from the advanced civilizations that filled the central parts of the galaxy. That was unusual. Civilizations that appeared in isolated regions usually developed slowly. If they ever developed at all, the team listened again. The pulse was simple and unrefined, but there was something unique about it. It didn't feel random. It had intention behind it. The researchers exchanged curious looks. Most intelligent species, when they first reached out into space, took many centuries to understand how to send signals properly. But these signals felt like someone was trying very hard to push past the limits of their technology. The aliens didn't know it yet, but they were listening to the first human attempts at sending long-distance messages from Earth's early space age. For the next few days, the researchers focused all their attention on this strange pattern. The more they listened, the more they realized it wasn't just a single message. Different kinds of signals were coming through, weak, distorted, and carried by an energy that shouldn't have been possible for a young species. Some signals carried tones, others carried structure, and some were just bursts of strong radio heat. It was messy, but it was alive. At first, the alien team assumed the senders were a very young civilization. They called them the Rim Echoes, a temporary name until they learned more. To them, this species seemed like a group of curious beings who had just discovered how big the universe really was. But as weeks passed, something began to bother the researchers. The patterns were changing too fast. In just a short period, the signals grew more complex. That kind of progress didn't make sense. Every species they had studied before took thousands of years to refine communication technology. But these Rim Echoes seemed to be speeding through development as if time didn't apply to them. That was the first sign that something about these beings was different. The Council of Senior Scientists called for a full investigation. They requested data about the source of the signals. Soon, long-range telescopes began mapping the region. The researchers expected to see a quiet, calm world. Instead, they found a planet full of storms, oceans that moved like living giants, mountains that spiked out of the ground, deserts that stretched endlessly, and wildlife that seemed to battle with the environment instead of living peacefully in it. The researchers stared at the data in disbelief. Most intelligent life grew on calm planets with stable climates and predictable environments. But this world, this Earth, was nothing like that. It looked wild, unpredictable, and sometimes unforgiving. The aliens didn't understand how a species could rise on such a planet at all, let alone build technology capable of reaching space. Maybe they evolved quickly because they had to. One researcher suggested softly. Nobody replied, but many silently agreed as more information came in. The alien team realized that the planet was what they classified as a difficult world. A world full of natural challenges that could easily wipe out a weak species. Usually, such worlds produced creatures that stayed close to their survival instincts. They did not build tools. They did not dream of the stars. They did not make art, cities, or research stations, yet these rim echoes did. The more the aliens studied, the more questions they had. How did a species from such a planet survive long enough to build machines? How did they adapt to such unpredictable weather? How did they protect themselves from the many dangers their environment constantly threw at them? The scientists began to worry, but they didn't say it out loud. Not yet. One day, as the senior researchers gathered to discuss new findings, a new message arrived. This time, it was more organized. It carried a pattern that clearly showed intelligence behind it. The tone in the room changed immediately. For the first time, they were sure someone out there was truly trying to reach the stars. The aliens watched the pattern carefully. It wasn't a threat. It didn't carry warnings or hostile energy. Instead, it felt curious, almost excited. It felt like someone saying, "Is anyone out there? We exist." The alien team grew silent. They all understood what this meant. A new civilization was rising, a species strong enough to survive a hostile world, determined enough to push through limits, brave enough to speak into the endless dark of space. The team sent the reports to their central government. The response they received simply said, "Observe. Do not interfere." And so they watched. Every day brought a new signal. Some came from early satellites. Some from ships orbiting the unknown planet. Some from large antenna systems trying to reach farther than they ever had before. Each message told a story of effort, of struggle, of hope. These beings were not sitting quietly on their world. They were pushing outward with everything they had. For the first time in a long time, the galaxy felt like it was changing. Many alien scientists felt excitement. Others felt fear. A few felt both emotions at the same time. One thing was clear to everyone. The rim echoes were not a simple young species. They were something else entirely. No one on that distant research station knew the name human yet. No one knew what kind of minds lived behind those signals. No one knew how much these beings cared about learning, exploring, and connecting. They didn't know how humans laughed, argued, dreamed, and hoped. All they saw were rapid advancements and signs of unusual resilience. Still, even without knowing the full truth, the aliens sensed that a new kind of presence was coming from the rim of the galaxy, one that didn't fit the old rules. As they continued to observe the planet, their curiosity grew deeper. Why were these beings learning so fast? How did they develop such strength? What did they want from the universe? Were they peaceful? Were they explorers? Were they simply trying to understand the world around them? Every day, those questions remained unanswered. But each new signal brought them a little closer. The researchers didn't realize it yet, but they were witnessing the early steps of a species that would one day be known across the galaxy by a name whispered with both awe and confusion. The Deathworlders. And all of it began with that tiny, stubborn pulse from the edge of the galaxy, one small signal that said, "We are here. And we are coming." The alien researchers had been observing the rim echoes for weeks now, and what they saw left them more puzzled than ever. At first, the signals had seemed small and clumsy, like the tentative first steps of a child learning to walk. But now they were changing. The patterns were no longer simple pulses. They were becoming structured, more organized, and even repeated in ways that suggested intention. Every day, new sequences appeared, sometimes weak and distorted, other times strong and clear. It was as if the species was learning faster than anything the aliens had seen before. The researchers gathered in small groups to discuss the phenomenon. Some were excited. Some were worried. One senior scientist leaned back in their chair and said, "This species is moving faster than expected. Whatever planet they come from must push them to evolve quickly." Nobody argued with that. From what the sensors showed, their world was not an easy one. It was full of storms, shifting lands, huge oceans, and countless dangers that could kill a fragile species in a moment. Most civilizations the aliens had studied took thousands of years to overcome challenges that the rim echoes seemed to handle in decades. The more the team studied, the more patterns they noticed. The signals were not random at all. Some seemed like messages, possibly even experiments in communication. Others were probes or calls into space, testing how far their reach could extend. It was a strange mix of curiosity, intelligence, and determination, all coming from a species that should have been too fragile to survive. Its environment, the aliens began to share data with their central archives. They expected reports of a weak, young species slowly learning about the universe. Instead, they were forced to update their models. The rim echoes were advancing faster than anything the galaxy had seen. In modern times, machines were being built, signals were being sent further into space, and the species itself was adapting in ways the aliens could barely explain. During one observation, a junior scientist pointed to a cluster of signals. "Look at this. They're building structures in orbit around their planet. They didn't even have the technology to do that a few years ago," they said. The room went silent. For the aliens, this was remarkable. Normally, it took a species hundreds of cycles before they could send objects into space and control them reliably. Yet here were the rim echoes, doing it in what felt like no time at all. Some of the researchers began to wonder about the kind of life that existed on their planet. It was not a calm, protected world like most of the species in their galaxy came from. Their home planet was extreme. Its weather could change violently within hours. Its landscapes were dangerous and unpredictable, and the animals there were often aggressive, hungry, or territorial. The aliens knew that only a species with exceptional adaptability could survive such a place long enough to learn, explore, and invent. Curiosity turned into concern when the researchers compared the rim echo's speed of advancement with predictions. By their calculations, no species from a world like that should have survived the first 1,000 cycles. Yet here they were, thriving, exploring, and even reaching into space. Something about their resilience was unprecedented. Some scientists whispered quietly that perhaps the species would not stop at exploration. They might eventually reshape their entire region of space, not despite the worry. There was a fascination growing among the alien researchers. They couldn't take their eyes off the signals. Every new sequence brought more questions. How did these beings organize themselves so efficiently? How did they survive in such a harsh world? Why did they seem eager to reach out into the unknown rather than stay safe on their planet? Over time, the researchers began to map out the species' planet in detail. They observed vast oceans where storms raged unpredictably, mountain ranges that seemed to rise suddenly from flat lands, deserts that could change overnight with shifting winds, and forests filled with predators and hidden dangers. It was a planet where even small mistakes could be deadly. The aliens realized that growing up on this planet was not about comfort. It was about constant adaptation, problem solving, and learning from mistakes fast. The alien researchers called it the Deathworld effect. They realized that species from such worlds were often underestimated. While they might appear small, fragile, or even primitive at first, the challenges of their home planets shaped them in ways that made them highly capable. They could survive, endure, and even thrive in situations where most other species would fail. Yet, the Rim Echoes were not only surviving, they were thriving in ways that combined intelligence with creativity. The aliens noticed small signs of culture in the signals. There were patterns that hinted at music, art, and storytelling, even within technical transmissions. The species seemed to value exploration and understanding, not just survival. That made the aliens' curiosity grow even more. They were not dealing with simple survivors. They were observing beings with purpose, imagination, and determination. The Council of Senior Scientists held a meeting to discuss the implications. Some argued for sending a small observation team closer to the planet to study the species more directly. Others cautioned that the species might be too unpredictable. If they had survived a world as harsh as theirs, perhaps their ingenuity and courage extended to situations far beyond what the aliens could imagine. The debate lasted for days. Meanwhile, the Rim Echoes continued to send signals further and further into space. They built small probes that moved beyond their planet, testing the limits of their environment and technology. Each probe seemed simple at first glance, but on closer inspection, they were incredibly resilient, designed to survive radiation, collisions, and extreme temperatures. The alien researchers were amazed. A fragile species would not have been able to do this. Only a species adapted to extreme challenges could produce such technology. So early in its development, some researchers began to feel a quiet unease. They had studied many civilizations that seemed harmless at first, only to discover dangerous tendencies later. They wondered whether the Rim Echoes, with their adaptability and ingenuity, could become a force that changed the galaxy in ways that could not be predicted. Yet alongside that fear, there was admiration. The species was clever, resilient, and determined, qualities the aliens themselves valued. Even if they approached them with caution. As the weeks passed, the alien team started to see a larger pattern. The Rim Echoes were not just sending signals, they were learning, improving, and responding. Each new transmission was better than the last. It was as if the species was listening to the galaxy, learning its language, and testing its limits. The researchers realized that the species was already thinking beyond their home planet, imagining new possibilities, and trying to reach other civilizations, even before fully understanding their own world. This realization changed everything for the team. They no longer saw the Rim Echoes as a minor curiosity or a young species they could observe casually. These beings were capable of rapid growth, innovation, and adaptation. The aliens began to think carefully about how they would respond if these beings eventually crossed paths with more advanced civilizations. The discovery of the Rim Echoes' rapid progress spread quietly among other research stations. Some alien scientists were excited to witness history in the making. Others felt nervous, unsure what a species capable of thriving on such a dangerous planet might do once it reached the wider galaxy. One thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same. By the end of Part 2, the alien researchers had reached a conclusion. The Rim Echoes were extraordinary. Their home planet had made them strong, inventive, and relentless. Every storm they survived, every predator they evaded, every disaster they endured had shaped a species that could not be underestimated. The aliens didn't know it yet, but the seeds of future encounters had already been planted. And so, from the rim of the galaxy, the Rim Echoes humans, though the aliens did not know their name, continued to send their signals, unaware that they had already begun to change the way other civilizations thought about life, survival, and the courage to explore the unknown. The alien researchers had been watching the Rim Echoes for a long time now, and they could no longer ignore what was happening. The signals coming from the distant planet were growing stronger and more organized every day. They were no longer just tests or simple messages. They carried information, patterns, and even hints of thought. Each pulse seemed to show the species learning faster than anyone could have predicted. The aliens realized that something extraordinary was happening, something that could change how they understood life in the galaxy. After much discussion, the Alien Council decided to take a cautious step. They sent a small exploration team to investigate the region near the Rim Echo's planet. The journey was long, even at the fastest speed their technology allowed. During the voyage, the team kept receiving updates from the distant planet. The signals were no longer random bursts. They were deliberate, showing signs of experimentation and adaptation. It was clear that the species was actively learning how to reach beyond its world, pushing its technology farther than anyone had thought possible. The alien explorers had expected to find a species that was still struggling with basic survival. They assumed the beings from the Rim would send signals that were weak, inconsistent, or primitive. But what they found instead was astonishing. The signals were durable, resilient, and intelligent. The technology behind them was rugged and practical. It was clear that the species had built their devices to survive harsh conditions, not just in space, but on their dangerous home planet. The researchers began to understand that the Rim Echo's planet was no ordinary world. Its storms could destroy entire cities. Its landscapes shifted unpredictably, with mountains, oceans, and deserts that could change in a single day. Its wildlife was aggressive and dangerous. Yet, despite all these challenges, the species had not only survived, they had thrived. They had learned to build, to experiment, and to explore. The alien explorers realized that a species raised on such a world would be resourceful, tough, and creative. As they approached the outer edge of the Rim Echo's space, the explorers noticed something unexpected. The small probes and signals that had been sent into space were moving farther than anticipated. They were not just experiments. They were steps toward real exploration. The Rim Echoes were testing their ability to survive in space, to gather information, and to push beyond their home planet. The aliens were impressed, but also wary. A species that could adapt so quickly might one day challenge other civilizations. The alien team began observing the Rim Echoes more closely. They saw evidence of small space vessels being built and launched. At first, the ships looked simple and fragile, but further observation showed that they were designed to withstand harsh conditions, high radiation, collisions with small objects, and extreme temperature changes. The alien explorers realized that the species' home world had taught them lessons in resilience and durability that no calm planet could. Every device, every ship, every signal reflected the harsh environment in which the species had grown. During their observations, the explorers also noticed hints of the species' personality. Despite the danger of their world, they were curious and determined. Their signals sometimes included patterns that were playful, experimental, or even artistic. It seemed that the species did not see survival alone as enough. They wanted to understand, to create, and to communicate. The alien researchers began to understand that the Rim Echoes were more than just survivors. They were thinkers, dreamers, and explorers. As the team drew closer to the planet, the signals became clearer and more frequent. It was as if the species had sensed that someone was watching and had begun sending more information. The aliens were able to learn small details about the beings without direct contact. They observed their ingenuity, their problem-solving skills, and their ability to work together. The more the explorers learned, the more they realized that these beings were capable of things that many civilizations in the galaxy would consider extraordinary. The senior alien researchers started to worry quietly. The Rim Echo's rapid progress suggested that they might reach a level of technology and understanding faster than anyone could predict. If they continued on this path, the species might not only explore space, they might reshape entire regions of it. Some of the explorers whispered to each other that the species might become unstoppable if left unchecked. But there was also admiration. Few species showed this combination of intelligence, resilience, and curiosity. As the alien team continued their journey, they discussed what they might encounter when they finally reached the planet. They imagined beings shaped by harsh conditions, tough, disciplined, and possibly aggressive. Yet, there was another possibility, one that some explorers quietly hoped for. Perhaps the species, despite their challenges, had learned compassion, cooperation, and creativity. After all, surviving a harsh world did not only teach toughness. It could also teach understanding, teamwork, and the ability to solve problems in unusual ways. Finally, after many cycles of travel, the alien team approached the outer boundary of the Rim Echo's explored space. From a distance, they saw signs of small settlements and technology. Nothing looked threatening or violent, but the sheer efficiency of the structures told a story. This species was not primitive. They were practical, resourceful, and organized. Every small station, every probe, every signal carried the mark of intelligence that had been honed under extreme conditions. The alien explorers realized that first contact would be more complicated than expected. They could not assume the species would be predictable. They could not assume the species would behave like any other civilization they had encountered. The Rim Echoes were strong, adaptable, and intelligent qualities that demanded respect. And yet, there was also curiosity and openness in their signals, suggesting that they might be eager to understand and communicate, rather than dominate or destroy. As the explorers studied the Rim Echoes, they also reflected on what it meant to come from a death world, a planet that challenged its inhabitants at every step. They realized that the species' strength did not come from weapons or aggression. It came from their ability to adapt, to learn, and to persist. Every hardship on their home world had taught them lessons about survival, problem-solving, and resilience that could not be learned anywhere else. In those final cycles before direct observation, the alien researchers felt a mix of anticipation and caution. They had been sent to study the Rim Echoes, but they knew that observing a species like this could never be purely academic. The beings they were approaching had already proven that they could think, adapt, and reach beyond their world. The explorers wondered what might happen when the species discovered that others were watching them from the stars. Even as they drew near, the Rim Echoes continued to send signals, growing in complexity and confidence. Each new message reflected learning, experimentation, and determination. The alien explorers understood that the species had not waited for permission or guidance to grow. They had done it on their own, shaped by their harsh world and their unyielding curiosity. By the end of Part 3, the alien explorers were ready to observe the Rim Echoes more closely than ever before. They knew that the species was extraordinary, not just because of their resilience, but because of their creativity, cooperation, and determination. The aliens had been prepared for a fragile, slow-developing civilization, but instead, they found something far more remarkable. The stage was set for the first real encounter. The alien team could sense the presence of beings who were strong, capable, and yet, in their own way, curious and open. The Rim Echoes were no longer just distant signals. They were a species ready to explore, to learn, and perhaps even to change the galaxy in ways no one could predict. And so, from the edge of the galaxy, the Rim Echoes continued to send their messages, unaware that they were being watched, and unaware that their arrival was about to mark the beginning of a story that would be remembered across the stars. The alien explorers had been watching the Rim Echoes for a long time, but now they were finally close enough to see signs of life beyond just the signals. From the edge of the rim, they could observe small structures and vehicles moving across the planet's surface. It was not a violent or chaotic scene. Instead, it was full of purpose. Everything the species did seemed calculated and practical. They were not just surviving, They were organizing, experimenting, and exploring their surroundings with care and intelligence. The alien researchers were fascinated. They had expected the species to be fragile, limited by their harsh environment. Instead, they were seeing beings who had adapted in ways the aliens could barely imagine. Their vehicles were simple but incredibly durable, able to survive storms, rough terrain, and even collisions that would have destroyed less sturdy creations. The explorers realized that every design reflected the lessons learned from their dangerous world. These beings had not only endured, but had learned to turn danger into opportunity. As the team continued to observe, they noticed signs of curiosity. The Rim Echoes were not content to stay on their planet. They were sending probes into orbit, testing how far they could reach into space. At first, the probes were small and slow, but each one was more advanced than the last. The aliens realized that this species was learning quickly, experimenting, and constantly improving. They were not following instructions from anyone. They were teaching themselves, step by step, challenge by challenge. The alien team began to feel a mixture of awe and caution. On one hand, it was inspiring to see such resilience and creativity. On the other hand, a species that could adapt so quickly could also be unpredictable. The researchers had studied many civilizations that were initially gentle, but later became dangerous. But what was different about these Rim Echoes was the combination of intelligence and adaptability with curiosity and a desire to explore rather than conquer. From their observation posts, the aliens could see the beings' living areas. They were not perfect or overly advanced, but they were organized and efficient. Every tool, every structure, every movement showed planning and teamwork. The Rim Echoes had developed cooperation as a survival skill, not as a choice. Their harsh world had taught them to depend on each other, to solve problems together, and to be inventive when faced with challenges that could have destroyed them. The alien explorers also noticed signs of culture. Even in small details, patterns, and signals, repeated sequences in communication, they could detect creativity, experimentation, and even playfulness. It was clear that this species did not only focus on survival. They valued understanding, exploration, and learning. They had curiosity built into them as deeply as their need to survive, and it shone through in everything they did. As the days passed, the aliens sent back more detailed reports to their council. The council had expected to find a species struggling to survive, but instead, they received reports of a civilization that combined toughness, ingenuity, and curiosity in a way that was rare even in the galaxy. The Rim Echoes were not only capable of surviving, they were capable of thriving and reaching beyond the limits of their world. Alien explorers began to refer to them privately as the Deathworlders, a name reflecting the harsh environment that had shaped them. It was not meant to scare, but to acknowledge the strength and adaptability of these beings. From what they had seen, a species raised on such a world would be unusually resourceful, able to find solutions in situations where others might fail. Every storm, every predator, every natural disaster had taught the Rim Echoes lessons that could not be learned in safer environments. While observing, the aliens also became aware of the Rim Echoes' cooperation. They worked together in ways that were subtle but effective. Small groups were seen coordinating to move heavy objects, repair equipment, or launch probes. They communicated efficiently, learning from each other and improving every time. It was clear that collaboration was a natural part of their species. Their world had forced them to rely on one another, and that reliance had developed into a strength that extended even to their early technology and exploration efforts. The alien explorers were impressed, but they remained cautious. The Rim Echoes had the potential to become a major force in the galaxy. Their combination of intelligence, resilience, and creativity could make them leaders in exploration or problem-solving. Yet, the aliens could not predict their behavior. Would they remain curious and peaceful, or would their strength eventually make them competitive, or even dangerous to others? One day, the explorers detected something remarkable. A new type of signal appeared, stronger and more structured than any before. It seemed almost deliberate, as if the rim echoes had sensed that someone was watching them from space. The signal carried a pattern of data that was not just technical, it reflected thought, intention, and even what could be interpreted as humor or playfulness. The aliens realized that this species was not only capable of survival, but also capable of expressing personality, creativity, and understanding through their technology. As the alien team watched, they reflected on what they had learned. The rim echo's strength came from more than just their environment. It came from their ability to adapt, to cooperate, and to remain curious in the face of constant challenges. Their home world had shaped them, yes, but it had not hardened them into something cruel or destructive. Instead, it had taught them resourcefulness, ingenuity, and even empathy. They could think, plan, and solve problems, but they could also care for one another and explore with purpose. The explorers shared their thoughts with each other quietly. They had expected a species that would be rough, limited, and simple. Instead, they found something extraordinary. A species shaped by hardship, yet full of curiosity, creativity, and determination. They were capable of survival, yes, but they were also capable of understanding, communication, and discovery. The alien team realized that the rim echoes were unlike any species they had studied before. Even as the observation continued, the aliens began to reconsider their approach. They had not intended to make direct contact, but now it seemed inevitable. The rim echo's signals were growing more frequent, more structured, and more intentional. It was as if they were inviting attention, reaching out beyond their world in ways that could not be ignored. The aliens knew that careful observation would only take them so far. At some point, they would need to decide whether to respond, and how. By the end of their observation period, the alien team had learned enough to understand that the rim echoes were remarkable not only for their survival skills, but for their ability to innovate, explore, and connect. They were strong, capable, and intelligent, but also curious, cooperative, and open. Their harsh world had shaped them into a species unlike any the galaxy had seen. And so, from the edge of the rim, the aliens watched as the rim echoes continued to send their signals, launch their probes, and explore their surroundings. The stage was set for the first real encounter. What they had observed was only the beginning. The rim echoes were not just survivors. They were explorers, learners, and dreamers. The aliens understood that when the time came to meet them, the encounter would not only be remarkable, it would be historic. Every day, the rim echoes moved closer to discovering that they were not alone. Every signal sent into space carried the potential for connection, understanding, and change. And the aliens, watching from above, realized that the arrival of this species from a harsh, dangerous world would mark a new chapter in the galaxy's history, one full of possibilities, surprises, and lessons that no one could yet predict. After weeks of careful observation, the alien explorers finally got a clearer picture of the rim echoes. They had expected to find a species that was rough, unpredictable, and focused mainly on survival. Instead, what they saw surprised them even more. The rim echoes were intelligent, inventive, and cooperative. They solved problems quickly, communicated effectively, and seemed genuinely curious about everything around them. Every small signal, every probe sent into space, every machine built told a story of determination and creativity. The alien team realized that it was time to attempt some kind of communication. They began sending signals toward the rim echo's planet, carefully designed to be non-threatening. They wanted to see if the species would respond, and if so, how. At first, the rim echoes seemed confused. Their replies were simple, sometimes delayed, but always curious. It was as if they were testing the new signals, trying to understand what they meant. The aliens watched eagerly. This was their first chance to learn how the rim echoes would react to something completely unknown. As the communication continued, patterns started to emerge. The rim echoes were cautious, but they were not afraid. They answered questions indirectly, sometimes repeating signals in ways that suggested they were experimenting with responses. The aliens could see intelligence and curiosity at work. They realized that this species had learned to adapt quickly, not just to the dangers of their own world, but to the challenges of new ideas and unknown situations. The alien researchers began to reflect on their earlier assumptions. They had expected a species shaped only by survival instincts. They thought that beings from such a dangerous planet would be aggressive, defensive, or even territorial. Instead, the rim echoes were cooperative, communicative, and capable of working together even when faced with a completely new and confusing situation. The aliens realized that surviving a difficult world had taught them not just toughness, but teamwork, patience, and creativity. As the communication progressed, the alien explorers began to see hints of the rim echo's culture, even in technical exchanges. There were signs of playfulness, experimentation, and curiosity. They were not simply solving problems. They were learning, trying new ideas, and even expressing themselves. The alien researchers were amazed. This species had survived a dangerous planet, built tools to explore space, and developed a sense of creativity that was rare even among more advanced civilizations. The explorers also noticed something unexpected: empathy. The rim echo's responses were careful, thoughtful, and sometimes surprisingly considerate. Even though they were a species shaped by hardship, they did not rush or attack. They seemed to understand that the aliens were strangers, that the signals were unknown, and that patience and cooperation were necessary. The aliens realized that this empathy was not accidental. It was shaped by generations of surviving together, of learning to care for each other in a world that could be unforgiving. As the first formal signals were exchanged, the alien team began to reconsider everything they had thought about the rim echoes. They were not simply survivors from a harsh world. They were explorers, thinkers, and learners. They had the ability to solve problems quickly, adapt to new challenges, and work together effectively. And yet, they were also curious, playful, and capable of understanding others. The alien researchers were both impressed and humbled. Some members of the team began to worry quietly. A species this capable and intelligent could become a major presence in the galaxy. Their combination of resilience, curiosity, and cooperation was unusual and powerful. Yet the same qualities that made them strong also made them trustworthy and open. It was a rare combination, one that could bring great opportunities if handled carefully. As the days passed, the aliens and the rim echoes began to exchange more complex ideas. The rim echoes were asking questions, experimenting with responses, and showing an eagerness to learn. They were not aggressive, but they were confident in their abilities. The alien team noticed that these beings were not bound by fear. They were guided by curiosity and problem-solving. Every challenge they had faced on their planet seemed to have prepared them for this moment. The alien researchers began to use a term among themselves: the Deathworlders. It was a name that reflected the harsh environment that had shaped this species, but it was also a recognition of their extraordinary resilience. They realized that the planet's dangers had not hardened the rim echoes into something cruel or dangerous. They had shaped them into beings capable of cooperation, creativity, and understanding. Every signal, every probe, and every experiment reflected that unique combination of strength and intelligence. The more the aliens learned, the more they understood that misconceptions were dangerous. They had expected beings shaped by hardship to be aggressive, selfish, or untrusting. Instead, the Rim Echoes were collaborative, adaptive, and eager to communicate. They had learned to survive, but they had also learned to care, to explore, and to innovate. The alien researchers realized that their assumptions had been wrong, and they quietly admired the Rim Echoes for teaching them a lesson about strength, resilience, and empathy. Even as communication continued, the Rim Echoes continued to send signals into space, exploring beyond their planet with small probes and experiments. The aliens watched closely, realizing that the species' progress would not stop. They were already thinking ahead, planning for challenges beyond their home world, and testing themselves against the unknown. The Deathworlders were not waiting for permission. They were creating their own path. The alien team began to prepare detailed reports for their council. They described the Rim Echoes' adaptability, intelligence, and cooperation. They highlighted the species' curiosity, creativity, and empathy. They warned that the species could become a major presence in the galaxy, but also emphasized that their intentions seemed peaceful and exploratory. The council listened with great interest. The Rim Echoes were not just a curiosity. They were a reminder that life shaped by hardship could produce unexpected strengths and insights. In the final days of this observation period, the alien explorers reflected on the journey. They had expected a fragile, simple species, but they had found beings capable of extraordinary adaptation and innovation. The Rim Echoes had survived a dangerous world, learned to cooperate, and developed curiosity and empathy that allowed them to explore without fear. The aliens realized that this species had a unique combination of qualities that could teach even advanced civilizations something about resilience, cooperation, and understanding. By the end of Part 5, the stage was set for a deeper encounter. Misconceptions had been challenged, curiosity had grown, and respect had been earned. The Rim Echoes had proven themselves not only survivors, but explorers, learners, and collaborators. The alien explorers understood that this first contact was only the beginning. They were witnessing the start of a story that could change the way the galaxy thought about life, adaptation, and the power of curiosity. And so, from the edge of the rim, the Deathworlders continued to send their signals and probes into space, unaware that their courage, intelligence, and cooperation were already inspiring a new understanding in the civilizations watching them. The galaxy was starting to realize that beings from a harsh world could offer lessons far beyond survival, that they could show what it meant to be truly adaptable, creative, and wise. The Rim Echoes had been sending signals into space for years, and now the aliens watching from afar finally understood who they were. These beings were not just survivors of a dangerous world. They were explorers, thinkers, and learners. Their intelligence, curiosity, and ability to cooperate had grown beyond what anyone had expected. And now, after all the observation, the aliens were ready for a closer encounter. The alien team approached the outer edge of the Rim Echo's space cautiously. They did not know how the species would react to direct presence. They had seen signals and probes before, but this was different. Now, they were physically entering the area where the species had built structures and launched their ships. The explorers could see signs of activity everywhere, small vehicles moving across the planet, instruments being tested, and even new probes being sent into orbit. Every detail reflected planning, ingenuity, and determination. The first indirect contact happened when one of the Rim Echo's probes detected the aliens' presence. The species reacted immediately, sending a new signal, stronger and more structured than anything the aliens had received before. It was a message of curiosity, not fear. They seemed eager to learn, to understand who had entered their space. The aliens realized that the Rim Echoes were not aggressive, but they were confident and capable, ready to respond to challenges with intelligence and care. For the first time, the aliens could study the species' technology in detail. The ships and probes were rugged and practical, designed to survive conditions that would destroy most machines. The aliens understood that this resilience was a reflection of the species' home world. Every device carried the lessons of storms, predators, and unpredictable landscapes. The Rim Echoes had learned to survive, adapt, and thrive in a world that demanded constant problem-solving. As the aliens observed, they also noticed the species' ability to cooperate. Groups of Rim Echoes worked together seamlessly, moving equipment, repairing machines, and coordinating launches. Communication was clear and efficient. The aliens realized that the species' ability to work together had been shaped by generations of living in a harsh environment, where mistakes could be fatal and cooperation was necessary for survival. Despite the caution that came with a first encounter, the aliens also saw signs of playfulness and creativity. The species experimented with new signals, tested different probe designs, and tried small innovations in their ships. It was clear that exploration for them was not just a necessity, it was a curiosity-driven process. The aliens realized that the Rim Echoes were learning and creating at the same time, showing intelligence in both survival and imagination. During these observations, the aliens began to reflect on their earlier misconceptions. They had expected beings from such a dangerous world to be aggressive, defensive, or selfish. Instead, they were seeing intelligence, collaboration, and openness. This species had been shaped by hardship, yes, but that hardship had taught them patience, teamwork, and the ability to think creatively. Their world had prepared them for challenges, but it had not hardened them into something cruel or dangerous. As direct observation continued, the alien researchers began to consider the larger implications. The Rim Echoes were capable of reaching far into space. Their probes were strong, their learning was fast, and their problem-solving skills were remarkable. Yet they were also capable of understanding and cooperation. It became clear that this species had the potential to bring knowledge, exploration, and creativity to the wider galaxy. They could be leaders in exploration, not through force, but through ingenuity and collaboration. The first direct exchange of messages showed the species' curiosity in action. They asked questions, tested responses, and shared information in a way that was thoughtful and careful. They were not aggressive or demanding. They were learning, trying to understand the alien visitors, and exploring the possibilities of connection. The aliens realized that the Rim Echo's strength was balanced by empathy and intelligence. They were capable of great power, but they also had the wisdom to use it carefully. As more communication and observation happened, the alien researchers began to understand something profound. The Rim Echoes had survived a world that would have destroyed most species, but they had not become hardened or selfish. Instead, they had developed resilience, creativity, curiosity, and cooperation. Their strength was not just physical or technological, it was moral, intellectual, and social. They had learned how to survive, how to explore, and how to connect. The news of the Rim Echo's arrival and abilities spread quietly across other civilizations in the galaxy. Some species were curious, some cautious, and some inspired. The aliens realized that beings from a harsh, dangerous world could offer lessons that went beyond survival. They could show how intelligence, empathy, and creativity could grow together. The Deathworlders, as the aliens now called them, were not just another species. They were a sign that life shaped by challenge could achieve remarkable things. The Rim Echoes continued to explore, to send signals, and to build new probes and ships. Every day brought new lessons, not just for themselves, but for the civilizations observing them. The aliens realized that first contact had changed everything. They had expected fear, aggression, or competition. Instead, they found curiosity, cooperation, and a species ready to explore without harm. The Rim Echoes had shown that a dangerous world could produce beings who were strong. intelligent, and compassionate at the same time got by the end of this period. The stage was set for a new chapter in galactic history. The Rim Echoes had arrived, and they were ready to expand their presence, learn more, and collaborate with others. The aliens knew that the species' strength, adaptability, and curiosity would influence the galaxy in ways that no one could predict. They were capable of surviving the harshest conditions, exploring the unknown, and sharing knowledge across civilizations. The galaxy began to see the Rim Echoes as more than survivors. They were explorers, learners, and creators. Their arrival marked the start of a new era, where challenge was not a limit, but a teacher. Every probe, every signal, every experiment showed a species shaped by hardship, but driven by curiosity, cooperation, and imagination. And so, from the edge of the rim, the Deathworlders continued to explore, build, and communicate. They did not arrive as conquerors, but as learners and collaborators. Their presence changed the way the galaxy thought about life on dangerous worlds. They had shown that strength was not just about survival, but about resilience, intelligence, empathy, and the courage to explore the unknown dot by the time the aliens fully interacted with them. It was clear the Rim Echoes were no ordinary species. They had turned adversity into creativity, danger into knowledge, and survival into exploration. The galaxy had learned an important lesson, that life shaped by challenge could bring extraordinary wisdom, collaboration, and possibilities. The story of the Rim Echoes, the Deathworlders, had begun at the edge of the galaxy, and it was only just starting. Every signal, every probe, every journey they undertook carried the promise of discovery, the hope of understanding, and the power of a species that had learned to thrive in the harshest conditions. The galaxy would never look at life the same way again.